All right, welcome to Talbott.tv episode number 5, if I'm counting correctly. And we are excited to have Phil White here with us, a legend in the northeastern region of the United States, up the Northern Territories, also called the Kingdom Territories, in northern Vermont. We're talking northeastern Vermont, at the base of Lake Memphremagog, which is the center of a lot of the events that Phil is famous for holding. So Phil has been holding lots of events, including winter events such as ice skating, summer events such as swimming. That's where I got a lot of my open water swimming experience, and broke a lot of my own personal records, was at Phil's summer games, where you can actually swim 1 mile, 3 miles, 6 miles, 10 miles or more. I've attempted the Border Buster and never completed it. I think, but I broke
You
my
got close.
record.
You got close.
I got 12 out of the 15 or 16 miles done, which is my personal record. And then, of course, the whole winter swimming thing, which we're going to go into. We're talking about swimming in ice water. And we'll also, in this session, learn a little bit more about Phil's background and before he became an event planner for swimmers, and some of the, he trained some of the world's famous marathon swimmers and some amazing ice swimmers who've gone to international swimming events in Europe. We're going to talk a little bit about the Dandelion run and some of the legal work that Phil did that inspired his entrance into some of these sporting events. So with no further ado, Phil, welcome to Talbott TV. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's great to be here, and thank you for introducing me to the world of Zoom.
Yeah, so go ahead.
I'm an old school guy.
Yeah.
We work off charts and paperwork and little rowboats, and so I reluctantly, kicking and screaming, have joined the Zoom generation.
And I'm so fortunate you have, because I think I talked to you at the last event you had up in last winter event, and said, hey, would you be up for doing an interview? And you're like, oh, don't do that Zoom thing yet. But so now you're doing Zoom, and that's what I've been doing these Talbott TVs on. And this is a little pet project that I've been working on for a while. But kind of came to fruition during this whole COVID crisis. So let's start by telling you, I want to ask you a little bit more about some of the Kingdom swims. So can you tell me about how some of these swimming events came to fruition, and tell us a little bit about some of the famous people who have broken their personal records or come through your Border Buster and Memphremagog swims.
Well, let me say that the area that I live in is called the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. It's a little special, most rural place in Vermont. In the 1980s, we were the 4th largest dairy producing county in the Northeast. And it's a land of kind of gentle beauty. It's working farms, working forests. We fish and dam our streams, both, and we're known for skiing and outdoor fishing and outdoor hunting. And for many years, Lake Memphremagog was the venue of a world-class professional swim that did 25 miles the length of the lake. They started in 1979 and continued on until about 2004. And then they felt that crossing the border was too difficult, and they became an all-Canadian swim. And so we lost our side of that swim. And in 2006, I started trying to help a local rec center, cool. And we're talking to them strategically about, the summer times, and I said, well, what are the problems that you have? Because they were losing $150,000 a year and $3 million in debt, and
Wow.
recently built. And they said, well, summers are dead here. And I said, we got to figure out how to get people in here in the summer. And I said, summers in Vermont are miracles.
Right.
And you're not gonna get people into the building unless they're training for an outdoor event in the summertime. And so I said, we have to go outdoors. So we started some biking and running events. And then I said, we have to have a swim. We just have to have a swim. We lost our international professional swim. We used to have a big Aquafest community party around that swim. So we have to have a swim. People said to me, oh, you'll only get 10 swimmers. Don't even bother. Now I'm a water rat since the day I was born. I'm not a long distance swimmer, but I love the water. I love to boat it. I love to swim it. I love to sailboard it. I feel probably most at home on the water. And I said, we have to have a water event. So I decided to do a 10-mile swim. And we debated, should we do 10 1-mile loops? And I said, no, there's no adventure to 10 1-mile loops. We got to have it as a big, you know,
And what year
and
was
a big,
this? What year
this,
was this?
we were planning in 2008.
Okay.
And I actually got a fair amount of resistance to it locally. But I decided to go forward, and I started hunting for 10-mile swimmers. And I stumbled across the name of Ned Dennison. Now, I
Mm.
was looking at him as a swimmer, and I couldn't find him. Finally, I found an Irish swimmer with an email address, asked him for Ned's email address, and I finally got it. And he said, well, I'm kind of busy training for a 34-mile Jersey swim, and so I can't come swim, but I can help you. And I think
We're
at that
talking
moment,
we're talking about Jersey in
Jersey Island,
yeah, okay. In Ireland.
Jersey in the channel, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And so I think he knew that I was determined to have a swim. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and that if he didn't help me, I'd probably kill a bunch of people. So he stepped in and he helped me every step of the way. And so did Leslie Thomas, who was doing swim art out in San Francisco. She did some of the early Alcatraz swims.
Awesome.
And she also couldn't come because that was her busy season, but she helped me. So the two of them really helped me every step of the way and persuaded me that it was the long distance between buoys, the adventurousness of it all. Now, some people want to see a buoy every 100 yards.
Yeah.
You don't see that at Kingdom Swim. You see a buoy every mile, maybe every 2 miles sometimes.
That's right.
And so, what I say to people is, well, when you get there, you'll see the buoy. And what they learn to do is swim by landmarks.
Yeah.
The good swimmers swim by the landmarks, and then as they get closer, they will see the buoy, and their kayaker can sight off of them. So I started up, and I had to raise money for the buoys. The buoys cost $2,000.
Wow.
So I got two local business people. One of them was Dina Gray at the East Side Restaurant to donate $1,000 each.
Yep.
And they were fighting each other at the time. She and Ernie Pomerleau or Tony Pomerleau were fighting over boundaries at the time.
Okay.
But I announced that the two of them had teamed up to donate for our buoys. And they both said, "You son of a bitch, Phil, how could you do, we're in the middle of a battle." I said, well, it's a Camp David truce,
Yes. Awesome.
So so then I had to figure out kayakers and get kayakers involved and boat patrol. And I call them the boat people. I knew the boat people on the lake, and a lot of them were neighbors, and they chipped in to help provide the boat support for the swim. And we set the buoys with concrete blocks the first year.
Okay.
And that first night, the night before, we had a pet and swimmers parade, and I had everybody bring flags from where they came from. And they marched down the street. It was a motley crew, and we had pets all dressed up in different costumes and stuff like that. The next year we had an Elton John contest, and that's when the parade got really good.
Awesome.
Look-alike contest. So we marched down the street. We had our pasta dinner, and in the morning at like 4:30, 5 o'clock, I'm up, kind of doing. Am I okay? Yeah, doing the last bit of deployment for the boats, and I've got it all on a chart on my computer, and I'm just about to punch print when this thunderstorm rolls through. I mean, wicked, wicked bad. High winds, thunderstorm. The power is out. So
Wow.
I've lost my deployment chart. So I go into Newport, thinking, well, maybe it's on there. Well, it's out in Newport too. I mean, it was totally. So I'm sitting there on the east side, and I'm doing up the hand chart. And meanwhile, the thunderstorm passes, but the rain is coming down in torrential rain.
Yep.
Just nasty, straight down. The wind had died, straight down. And we're getting ready, and the kayakers are getting really nervous. The swimmers are fine. Kayakers are really nervous.
Yep.
And we're doing the safety meeting in the pavilion there, and half an hour before the swim was to start, the rain stopped. Dead stop, and the water was as calm as could be.
Wow.
And we had some great swimmers that first year. David Barra signed up for the first year, and at the time, his only long distance swim was Ederle with a current assist. So this was his longest non-current assist swim in his life. And the next year, he went on to do the Triple Crown in like 84 days, and then the next year after that, he started 8 bridges, and and then. But so I tell him that I made him what he is today. And he kind of grow, all right, Phil. And Ronnie Davies set the course record at 4 hours and 4 minutes.
Wow.
And that's when I really fell in love with open water swimming of a distance. I mean, I'd done some flipper swims in Greece that were 3, 4, 5 miles long, but they were flipper and it was buoyant, and but watching her swim, she is so long in the water and so graceful.
Yep.
I just fell in love with the sport as an incredible activity and great to be part of. So then we get through the swim, and we've planned it as best as we could for a first inaugural event up to, the awards and all that stuff. And so then I look around, and I realized I've got $2,000 worth of buoys out there in the water, and we got to get them in. And I really hadn't thought about that, except one of them had been vandalized before the swim. So I was sensitive to the fact that I couldn't have somebody going around with a puncher and killing off my buoys.
Yeah.
Because there's a bit of renegade up here that I love, but you got to be aware of.
Yeah.
And so I look at everybody and say, we got to go out and pick up the buoys. Sorry, Phil, I hadn't, I got plans at home, blah, 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 blah. And everybody vanished. So now I'm there alone. And I got to go pick up these buoys, and they're tied to concrete blocks.
Oh, my gosh.
So I said, well, the first thing I need to do is go have a drink. So I went over to the east side, the deck. They had just opened, and my son's friend, Kara was working at the bar.
Yep.
And Kara Campbell, and her dad is he's a friend of mine, and I know him well. And but I went up to Kara, and Jimmy was sitting there, and I told her what I was facing, and I needed a drink before I went out and embarked on this task, and mostly just to wash out the day so I could focus on what was ahead.
Sure.
Mostly. And so Jimmy offered me a drink. So I took my drink and I went out, and then now I'm an old man, and I'm trying to pull up these concrete blocks, and sometimes it's 2 of them on a line, and
wow.
And I can't get them up. So I could get them up 3 or 4 feet, and then tie them and drag a few of them into shallow water.
Okay.
And leave them there for the next day, because I didn't want to just cut the rope, because it would be floating on the surface and it could tangle up a propeller or something like that.
Right.
And I didn't want to leave them there anyway. So I pull up a few and then I go back to the east side and Jimmy's gone. But I say to Kara, his daughter, is my tab still open? And she said, of course, Phil, for you, the tab is still open. So I had another drink. And then I went out and got another couple of buoys. And then I came back and I did that till 2 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And, and, um, and then I had lots of cleanup and Kara was working all week. And so I'd go up, is the tab still open? And she said, yes. And then I ran into Jimmy the next Friday and I thanked him for keeping his tab open. He said, I was happy to buy you a drink. I said, no, no, no. Your tab was open all week, Jimmy, and I really want to thank you. And he looked at me and said, you son of a bitch. But that's the fun of, and I should say, Greg O'Connor was the very first person to sign up. And that first year we had 100 swimmers.
Wow.
Which was just amazed me. You know, they came out of nowhere. The sport was just starting. I mean, it had been around obviously for a long time, but it was beginning to gain some recent popularity.
Definitely.
And there weren't that many events back then.
Right.
So I mean, the gut hadn't, you know, the suck hadn't been, you know, on. Then I think they started the next year or the year after.
Yeah.
There were a whole lot of other swims, the Charleston swims,
Yeah.
you know. So so that was the Kingdom swim.
Nice.
And I'd been telling people, you know, if you like Memphremagog, because Memphremagog is a big, mysterious lake.
Definitely.
And it's not
its own monster, right?
It has a well-documented monster. I've talked to people who have actually seen not just a little bump in the surface, but I do this, my reenactment, a neck out of the water with a horse head,
yeah.
You know, and close to their boat, and they're sane and weren't drinking or smoking dope.
Yep.
When they saw it, you know, and so we've got a well-documented lake creature.
Yep.
Who is swimmer friendly. The very first guy who swam the length of the lake got separated from his boats. This was in 1955. His parents and his friends were rowing boats, and he was 19.
Yeah.
Billy Connor, and he got separated, and he felt this warmth. It was in a thunderstorm. So he was swimming through a thunderstorm. This is 1955.
Yeah.
And he runs into this warmth, and he sees Memphrey, the neck, the horse, the lips like they were ready to kiss him. And Memphrey led him back to his rowboats in the middle of the storm.
Wow.
And so that's how we know Memphrey is a swimmer friendly lake creature.
Yep.
Anyway, and so it's a mysterious lake. It's not pristine by any means, but it's clean enough, and it's got some spring-fed nature to it. But there are a lot of lakes in this area that are spring-fed, and they're high in the watershed. So a little bit to the south of them, the waters are flowing into the Connecticut and down into the Atlantic, into Long Island Sound.
Yep.
And where we are, the rivers flow north to the St. Lawrence. And so when you're that high in the watershed, I mean, these lakes are drinking water quality.
Definitely.
And the other thing is that there's little to no boat traffic on these lakes. People complain about it from a tourist perspective, but there's little to no boat traffic. And when I started thinking about organizing swimming, I realized that the lack of boat traffic was a real, and the clarity of the water and the lack of boat traffic was a real draw. And what we've created over the last 10, 12 years is a community of kayakers, of boat people, of support. And when you need all three of those things, you know, good waters, no boats, and support. And so that's what we've built over the years.
Awesome. That's amazing. Yeah. So not only are these Kingdom swims famous for long distance and open water swimming in the summertime, but also you're famous for the first, and probably only in ice swim meet, and it's a 25-yard 2-lane swimming pool that you cut in the ice.
It's a 25-meter 2-lane pool cut in the ice. It's the only I've only come across one other ice pool in New York. It's near Cooperstown, and it's a short. It's like 10 yards,
Yeah.
and it is a swim, and they use it to raise money. But in terms of a 25-meter competitive world class cut in the ice pool, that was it. And
The audio is dropping out just a little bit. Hold on a second. Let's give it a second. See. Oh, you're on. It says you're on mute. Okay, it looks like you're good. Good now.
there we go. So
See, actually, before you go, so this is like a 2-lane pool that is. It's. We just had February was our 6th event, our 6th annual event, right before the COVID hit. And it's 2 lanes, and you have to take a chainsaw to cut what, a foot or 2 feet of ice in order to create this swimming pool. Maybe you could go into a little description about how that works.
The first year they were 3 foot. The lake was 3 foot thick.
Wow.
And it was bitter cold that winter. And it took Newport Rec Department helped us cut the pool. They were the pool cutters, and they stuck with that until they got it done. They were hauling the blocks out of the ice at the time.
Yep.
So in the pictures you could see the blocks of ice, and they finished it at 3:30 on the Friday afternoon before the swim.
Wow.
And they were exhausted, and they went home.
Yep.
And so I set up, I'd never done this before, and I set up a bubbler to keep the pool open.
Was there some Russian assistance from some of the international swimmers that had visited from Russia to help you out with that?
Well, what happened was I really didn't have any help let me step back a little bit.
Okay.
But what I was going to say was that the bubbler did not keep the pool fully open, and my cutters were gone. They were exhausted.
Yeah.
And so the swimmers themselves that next day had to help pound open the ice and swim. And some of them were the international crew, that 4 of them that had come over for the first U.S. Winter Swim Championship.
Right.
Of part of the Winter Swim, the International Winter Swimming Association.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like Tom Sawyer selling the right to make the fence, to paint the fence.
Yeah.
They were not used to that. I'll give them that. And it's kind of the Kingdom way. Everybody chips in and helps out and does what they have to do. But they're used to a much more completed,
mature, because this is the first ice event ever in the continent of North America, right? So, and they have been doing this for decades, or I don't know about decades, but at least for years in Russia, right?
Yeah. What happened was it started with a joke.
Yeah.
I had a picture of an old ice saw, and the rec department was using it to cut blocks to make an ice maze for their winter festival. And I took a picture of it. This was the year before, and I posted it and said, "Anybody want to go swimming?" And then, then a few people, got in touch with me, like Darren Miller, and said, "Are you kidding?" And I said, "I'm only half kidding. I think I can get the pool cut, but I don't know anything about winter swimming, and I wouldn't even try to do this unless I had the help to do it." And this group, he said, "Well, I've got this group. We just came back from a winter swim championship, and we're so excited. We want to get this going in the U.S. But we don't have a venue." So we teamed up for that first year, and they were helpful in a lot of ways. But I don't think they were happy that we all had to help make the pool on Saturday morning of the pool.
Yeah, because it was extreme conditions that year. It was really cold.
It was, and so we kind of went our ways. And the Massachusetts group was, and Janet Manning, and Greg O'Connor, and a few others were really supportive of keeping going. I said, "Should we keep going?" And then we knew that it was only going to keep going if we could build a community in North America,
Yeah.
which we've done over the years. It's really been extraordinary. And last year we had 100 swimmers.
Yep.
The first year we had 40, and for 3 or 4 years it hovered around 40, and then we started working on people to train them in the fall and get them used to cold water, and the community has just blossomed. And
That's
a lot
incredible.
of them are open water swimmers too.
Right.
So it really has been a great tribe to work with.
Definitely, definitely. It's been an incredible experience for me. Just, I missed that first year. Really, I wanted to come up that first year and just be a cheerleader, because I thought it was an incredible concept and event. But I didn't make it up that first year. But then I got inspired to sign up for the second year, and I got hooked. I thought it was just a kind of a once in a lifetime experience. I was going to swim, 25 yards freestyle, and then I would be done. But of course, one thing led to another, and now I'm on your committee to plan, and I think we reached a decision. I don't know if this is the right venue to announce it, but we probably won't have it next year because of COVID, right? So we'll skip a year, right?
Where that's the possibility, and I think it's probably 60-40 right now.
60-40.
We'll make the decision in December.
Yep.
But it's funny, Erin Churchill thought she would be coming up with her buddies for a one and done, and she got hooked. And
That's right.
I think it's as much the
Came out
people.
from Arizona, right? Or New Mexico. She comes out from New Mexico.
New Mexico.
Yeah.
Yep. And but some great support. And the second year, as part of it, I like to plan things that are fun, like the pet and swimmer parade and stuff like that. So that's when we had the hat party or the hat contest.
Yeah,
And that
awesome.
kicks the thing off, great. And people are still talking about how you were robbed of the hat that I think the second year when you showed up full Viking dress and a beard.
Well, there's a story behind that. I just did my DNA test, and I used there's 23andMe and Ancestry DNA, and I did it through Ancestry.com, Ancestry DNA. I ended up doing it through 23andMe after, but it came back that I was like, I don't know, somewhere between 30 and 80% Viking, Scandinavian, and I knew I had at least 30% Scandinavian blood, but I didn't think I was that much. So it turns out that once they had more samples, and once I did 23andMe, it's closer to about 35% Norwegian and Swedish blood. But so I got really into the whole Viking thing. Grew big, massive beard. Mindy helped me build out a big headdress, and we had a lot of fun that year. But that was a lot of fun, and it was fun to get into my heritage. But there was another swimmer out from San Francisco. He was also he's more of a pure Viking. Do you remember his name? Anyway, he's a Cirque swimmer, South End Rowing Club swimmer, and he was out there, and he was also doing the whole Viking thing with the beard and the horns. But I think my horns were a little bit bigger. My beard was a little bit bigger. So.
And you had the cape, and you had the wristbands, and you were.
I ended up being your poster boy for a couple of years after that. Yeah,
you were.
Awesome. So let's segue, because the winter swims are incredible. The summer swims are incredible. But there's something that a lot of your fans don't know about you, and that is that you have a history of having this former life of being a lawyer and working some pretty very, very, especially for me, very interesting cases of relating to child abuse and domestic abuse, and you're a real hero around a lot of that. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about the Dandelion Run and some of the work that you've done as a lawyer, and that kind of like segued into this second life of yours here as being a sporting event planner.
I've done a lot of things in my life. I've driven carriages in Central Park. I've been a carpenter. I've worked in a casino as a cashier in Greece. And I was a college dropout after 8 weeks. I led my class in Chicago in dropping out.
Oh my God.
and but when I did go back to school, I was headed for geology actually, and then I decided I wanted to be an environmental mediator, and ended up going to law school and working my way through law school, and I worked hard, worked full time, went to law school full time, and at Georgetown, and
Great
but
school.
I knew that I wanted to come back to Vermont.
Mm-hmm. I lost your audio.
Yeah, there we go. I don't know what I have to do to keep it on, but
that's okay.
So I fell in love with Vermont. In fact, the summer that I worked as a carpenter in renovating a house in Roxbury, Vermont, and knew that then when I could, I wanted to live here because the community was just fantastic. The community of people and the miracle of summer is just profound in Vermont. And so when I got up here, I ended up with a job as a deputy state's attorney, and then in Montpelier, and then St. Johnsbury, and then the Orleans County state's attorney died while he was under indictment, and he was not a lawyer even.
Okay.
And so I was appointed and Orleans County was pretty rough and ragged, and from a law enforcement perspective. We had Saturday night drive-by shootings, with
Wow.
we had lots of great grudges and wildness, bank robberies that were solved and things like that.
What year is this? 70s or
1980? Yeah,
1980.
1980 was when I was right. But I'd never been up here before, and I got to say, the first time I came into the town down off the interstate and came across one of those bridges that crossed the Clyde River into the, and it was like 5 o'clock in the morning, and everybody was fishing. I just fell in love with the place. So I was a prosecutor for 10 years here, and then I was a well-heeled trial lawyer in Montpelier for another 15, 20 years and moved back here. But while I was a prosecutor, the story of the Dandelion Run started when a 15-year-old woman who was pregnant was killed by her 16-year-old boyfriend on May 21st, 1981. And I was driving out to the scene of the crime when I drove through what I now call the world famous dandelion fields of Morgan Holland and Derby. I'd never seen them before, and it was May 21st, and they were at their height.
Wow.
And I just was in awe of the beauty of that moment, and also the contrast of these two people walking into the woods, and her in love, and him walking with a bat by his side, at the ready to kill her.
Wow.
So I prosecuted the case, and the jury convicted him of first-degree murder. And then years later, when I was back here trying to go outdoors for this local rec center, we decided to do a run, and I said it has to be on May 21st because I had been out to those fields probably not every year, but most years on May 21st. Just something that I did. And I knew that late spring, early spring, they were always bountiful on that day. So we started the dandelion runs on dirt roads through the dandelion fields, and we just touted it as the Dandelion Run. And the family knew that I was dedicating it to Terry Weed, which is the girl's name. But I didn't want to take away from the joy of the run. It's spring. I love to jog. I love to run at the time, and the motto of the run is called "Just for the Fun of It," and that's how most of these events are. They're kind of like high-level pickup games where we kind of know what we're doing, and they'll challenge the best of you guys, but they're also available and fun for the little people like me. And so a few years ago, I decided it's time to just go public with it. And I did. And what's happened is that people have wrapped their arms around the run. And this year, when we couldn't do the run, we did a virtual run. I really got that word out for both celebrating dandelions, which are a very special flower,
Right. Because
and
they're a weed,
celebrating.
right? They're a weed,
It's
they're wild,
it's
they're
it's
beautiful.
not a weed. It's not a weed.
It's not a weed. It's only a
Not a
weed
weed.
on
It's
some
a flower.
people's lawns that use
It's
like chemicals to get rid of them.
It says, I don't need, the flower says, I don't need humans to cultivate me. I can stand or fall. You know, it's kind of a live free or die kind of dandelion.
Awesome. Yep, yep.
And,
That's
and
symbolism.
yes, and you can, and you can actually use them for all sorts of things,
That's
for
true.
medicine, for tea, for, every part of the dandelion can be used. And they were actually imported from England
Oh, I didn't
in
know that.
well-tended gardens.
Yep,
And then they just said,
they took off.
"Screw you guys, we're going," and off they went to the rest of North America. And you just gotta love them, and they're beautiful. When
Definitely, definitely.
you see the fields
Oh,
golden, and you look out across the valleys, and you don't see the individual dandelions, you just see these golden fields.
yeah. I gotta come
Um,
out there and take some photos. That sounds amazing.
yeah, come on up, run it.
I will. I can't run, but I've no knees left, so that's why I swim.
Okay,
so,
okay,
so you
I'll
did
give you that.
have this amazing running event that's been going on for decades, and it's dedicated to very traumatic,
Carry weed. Yep.
emotional um, trial and situation that you ran into. And so that's just just an interesting backstory on how you got into some of these like sporting events. Now, also maybe tell me a little bit about, because I went to Boston College and we had one of my he wasn't a classmate, but he was there. He was just like a senior or junior when I was a freshman at BC, and I met him through my mother's flea bag. He ended up writing a story about the Catholic priest abuse and creating a Academy Award winning movie called Spotlight about the Boston Globe and investigating. And this was I was in college in the late 80s, and this is kind of like the height of when all that was happening. And you got involved in kind of representing some people with some abuse and won some cases. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. I think you mentioned earlier that one guy who was fairly compromised from his childhood, he ended up becoming a car mechanic, and you helped him get some money so that he actually could start his own garage, and so now he's been able to improve his life. So maybe you can go into a little bit about some of that, and take me back to the year that started.
So I'll go to the start. And a lot of this is just kind of following your nose where the winds are pulling you, which is how I've done most of the good things that I've done in my life, is following my nose, and probably a lot of the bad things I've done in my life by following my nose. But when I first came here
Hold on,
as
we've
a
got a little
prosecutor,
bit.
there was no the social theory. Okay, there was a social theory of that you couldn't bring criminal cases in child sexual abuse because the courts weren't set up for kids,
Yeah.
and they'll be traumatized again.
Mm-hmm.
And so a group of social workers came to me and they said, we're dealing with this incest case, but we're not supposed to be prosecuting it, but he's reoffending. Would you take the case? And I
Yeah.
said, of course I'd take the case. And they warned me what I was up against. And they said, we just have to figure out a way to do this. So as a result of that and a few other things, we formed the first interagency protocol, or one of the first interagency written protocols that got the social workers, the police, the mental health workers, the probation officers, all on the same page in terms of how we would respond. And we all had our different roles, and we were to stay in those roles, and we had to trust that each other would do that, would stay in their roles. And we were the PEC's bad boys. I mean, because we were not supposed to be doing it, but we were tolerated.
Yep.
And then we got a few big crises in Vermont, and all of a sudden we were the pilot. And all of a sudden,
lost your audio.
all
You're back.
of a sudden, we were the example for the rest of the state, and we got well known for it. And I had a fair number of child sexual abuse prosecutions that were very successful.
Mm-hmm.
I had a daycare case which was run with video testimony,
Mm-hmm.
and won that. And I became known as somebody who could deal with child sexual abuse. And when I went into private practice, and before I left, I prosecuted a priest who had been abusive, and I wasn't able to finish the case, but I learned a lot because I left. The next prosecutor finished it, but I learned a lot about the Catholic Church and what it was doing to hide cases.
Yep.
And move priests from parish to parish, and exposing more kids to risk.
Yep.
So when I got into private practice, I had a lot of divorced people going through divorce where there was allegations of child sexual abuse, and the judges were typically very skeptical because, they didn't trust, coming out in a divorce. And of course, my attitude was, divorces involve dysfunctional relationships, and why should it be any less prevalent in divorces than they were? So I took on those cases if I believed the kid. And so I became known for that, and I became known as somebody who would take on adult survivors. And some of those were adults who had been molested by a priest. And so I sued a few times on those, and one of those cases was we didn't settle for. So the Catholic Church typically would offer, they'd fight a bit, and then they'd offer something less than $100,000, maybe less than even $50,000, and and I would tell people, it's your choice.
Right.
I think if we go a little further, we may discover that they knew that this priest was an abuser, and we would break into the $1 million category.
Yeah.
But for people who've lived their life traumatized by the abuse, sometimes $40,000 seems like a lot, and when they grab it, it can make a big difference in their lives. Like that, it was the car mechanic. Yeah. Who was working for somebody and ended up being able to open his own shop, and it qualitatively changed his life. That's awesome. So in the process of that, a guy comes to me, and he says that he's been abused in the Catholic orphanage at St. Joseph's. His name is Joey Barkwin.
What city or what town was this in?
It's in Burlington, Vermont.
Yeah.
And he was in Florida. His parents, he grew up in Montpelier. He was adopted out of the orphanage.
Okay.
And he was terrified of, he came to me, but he was terrified of even my secretary learning the details of his abuse. And, right. I did what I could to evaluate his claim, because it was single, there's no forensic evidence you're going to have.
Right.
And so I decided he was telling me the truth.
Yeah.
And so I said, Joey, we'll bring a case against the Catholic Church. We had an argument that the statute of limitations hadn't run. And so he brought suit, and I said, and we're going to go on television, have a press conference. You're going to discuss that you bring this suit.
Yep.
And either nobody will show up, or the world will show up.
Right.
Because if this happened, it didn't happen in isolation.
Right.
So he went forward and went public, and sure enough, the world came forward. And before we were done, we had probably 100, 200 people, maybe 250 people who were talking about some level of physical or sexual abuse in this orphanage.
Wow.
And one of them was a guy who was,
And it was girls and boys, right, that were
yes,
affected by
yes,
the nuns. Yeah, and it was mostly
girls.
nuns that were running the orphanage, because a lot of times you hear abuse from priests, and this was kind of a unique story because it was about a lot of the nuns were responsible for it.
It was both. It was both. I mean, there was one priest who was checking a boy out of the orphanage like he was a library book for the weekend,
Hmm.
and that priest ended up being the priest who molested a kid up here in Orleans County that I prosecuted.
Oh wow.
But we didn't have the information that the Catholic Church knew about
Right, because they
this
were trying
priest,
to cover it all up. Yeah.
back then. But once we found that out, so he brought his own separate suit against that priest.
Wow.
But it was a huge story, and it led to that BuzzFeed article, the reporter who was studying abuse in orphanages all over the world.
Yeah.
But this was the best documented because there were lawsuits and depositions and transcribed testimony of victims and witnesses.
Yeah. 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 I think I read that BuzzFeed article. I read some article on Facebook that you had mentioned and posted about. And yeah, I didn't read all of it, but it was pretty heavy. And I can put a link in when I put this up on my blog at talbott.tv. I can put a link to it for people who want to dig deeper into it and learn more about the details. But yeah, it was definitely very emotional when I read through it. I remember from what I recall, there was a woman who was like, there was like a reunion for these, survivors of the orphanage, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I went to that orphanage," and she had kind of didn't have much of a memory. She knew she came from that orphanage, but she didn't have much of a memory. But she thought the word survivor was kind of funny. But she shows up, and then she's just getting all these flashbacks, and everyone was talking about all of the abuse that was happening, and she was like, "Oh my gosh!" And she had so repressed all of these memories that it was quite an event for her.
It was amazing. I mean, most lawyers say don't talk to the press and don't, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
But my approach was, my approach to being, when you're dealing with survivors and victims is you can't control the ultimate outcome. What you can control is that you speak up.
Yeah.
And by speaking up and breaking the silence, you're doing something really powerful. And I say that to 7-year-old kids. If some lawyers said to me, I can't prosecute these cases because I couldn't stand losing. And I said, well, you're losing by not prosecuting. And
Right.
what I would say to kids was, don't worry about what the jury's going to do.
Right.
Don't worry about that. If you can talk about this in open court and break the silence,
Yep.
you're winning.
Right.
And so we would have our parties for these little kids before the trial was even over, when they'd come back having testified, so they had something to be proud of. They weren't hanging on, will the jury believe me? They're just telling their story.
Exactly.
And so we decided to have a reunion.
Win. It's a personal win.
And we decided to have a reunion. And it was one of the more powerful things I've been to in my life.
Wow.
Because there was one point where one guy came and he had been a bully. And he came to the reunion, and one of the kids that he had bullied was there at the reunion. And he said, I've wanted to say this to you for most of my adult life. I'm sorry.
Mm.
And they hugged each other and they got through it. And it was like, they'd been deprived of that reconciliation because they were, living in terror and repression from, the abuse that they'd experienced at the orphanage.
Right. Wow. That's intense.
So,
well,
yeah.
You know what, Phil, I'm just in awe of what you've created, not only your experience as a lawyer and protecting people and helping them face some of the tragedy that they've gone through, but also the amazing swims. I've personally broken a lot of my personal distance records and personal records, and really evolved through a lot of the Kingdom events. And I want to really thank you. You're one of my idols, my heroes in on this world, and I really appreciate the experience and the time and the opportunity to interview you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to visit with you.
Yes, and looking forward. So what's the next event? What do we got going? I know there's COVID, so a lot is up in the air. But anything going on this? Well, I mean, we're almost over with the summer, so.
Fly to Pie is the next one.
What's that?
So there's a great pizza place in basically in the farm fields of West Glover.
Yep.
And it's called Parker Pie. And they make great pizza. They have world-class beer there, and they're well known in the area as just the best pizza place you can go to. And they have bands and music on Saturday, you know, on different nights and stuff like that. So they were opening another Parker Pie up at the airport. This is about 5, 6, 7 years ago, and they're having all sorts of problems with getting it permitted. But I started this. I said, well, we got to have an event that goes from pie to pie, from the airport down to Parker Pie and West Glover, a run and a bike. And I wanted to have horseback on there too, but the insurance company wouldn't let me do horses.
The horses. So it's riding bicycles and jogging and running.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so finally they got their permit, and I said, you know, okay, you know, we're gonna, you know, somebody, a friend, a swimmer, asked me whether I was going to do it, and I said, yeah, but I only had one person sign up that first year because it was. So I let her know. I said, there's only one person. She said, well, I'm doing it. Well, I said, but I don't even have a route yet. She says, I'm doing it. So I went out. I've got a little coupe convertible, and it was a beautiful fall day. It was the run itself was a week away, the bike. So I went out with an old friend of mine from West Glover, and we drove around the back roads and came up with a route, mostly all dirt roads, and very hilly and challenging. I call it Vista Riddled.
And awesome.
Yeah, that's the euphemism.
Yeah.
And then I measured it, and it was just about 26 miles. Okay. And the Dandelion run is a half marathon. Okay. You know, and I can say this is the toughest half marathon east of the Mississippi, but it's a half marathon. So now I realized we had the toughest marathon east of the Mississippi. I think one of the 3 or 4 toughest. And so we did the first year with 3 people, and it's always been small because people don't typically do that twice. You know, they want to be able to say they've done it once, but doesn't, you know, except for some bicycles. Yeah. Greg O'Connor has done it with his kids, not the full 26. They did. He and his family did the family challenge, which is a 13.5 mile, awesome. And part of it goes through this farmyard. And that day it was rainy, and they were moving manure, and so Greg and his family showed up at Parker Pie with their backs all mottled with what normally is mud, but was shit. And he said, "This is my kind of event."
Yeah. Horse poop or?
It was cow poop.
Cow poop. Yeah, that's a cow.
Yeah, manure. Yeah. And so we have that coming up, and this summer we've been doing small group socially distanced swims. So we have special rules. You have to wear a mask while you're gathering. We set you off one at a time, not in a mass start. When you get there, typically for the swims you have to leave, but now Parker Pie will take them and can take up to 50 people at a time, and they have outdoor seating. So now the trick is to arrange for the arrival over the course of 4 hours so that we don't overload the pie, because we serve them all the pie you can eat when you get there. And
Not cow pies.
the
We're talking about like pizza pies.
no, we're talking about pizza pies. Yeah. And the airport restaurant closed, which was really too bad. So that's when I got it named. I renamed it Fly to Pie because it's at an airport.
Okay.
So it's one of my favorite, but it's already a small group,
Yep.
but
What year?
it's coming up
When is it coming up? What's the date?
October 3rd. So it's at the height of fall foliage.
Oh, beautiful! Wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing. Well,
yeah.
I'll put your website links on my blog, which is at talbott.tv, and so that people can learn more about the different events going on, both the winter and summer, the runs, the swims, and the crazy ice events such as swimming and things like that. And so I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully someday soon when this whole COVID thing makes travel a little bit easier.
Well, thanks for doing this, Talbott.
Awesome. All right. Take care, Phil. Thanks so much.
Bye bye.